Welcome to the video. We are diving into Workload Identity Federation, where we are authenticating and authorizing our Terraform deployments on GCP via GitHub Actions. And we're going to need a whole laundry list of things to get it set up. So we'll need service accounts, identity pool providers, policy bindings and principles for running our workloads, and we'll need a Terraform file for describing our deployment steps. So with that in mind, we'll jump into the configurations. We'll start off with the service accounts. We've got one set up already. We've called it GitHub Actions-SA, which is provisioned with the editor role. The account will not be running the deployments itself. Instead, we will be impersonating it by borrowing its permissions temporarily during its deployment via the Workload Identity Federation. So with that set up, we can jump into our Workload Identity Federation. We've got our identity pool set up, which we've enabled GitHub pool, and we've got one of the providers set up. And we'll just dive into the configuration. So we got our issuer URL to identify GitHub as the provider, as that's where we'll be getting our tokens back from. And then following on from that, we have our attribute mapping, which is used to connect the GitHub token claims to our GCP identity attributes. So for example, we've got our audience attributes, repository owner, the actor, and the repository attributes. Those are all used as mappings for this provider. We follow on to the most important component of this provider, which is setting an attribute condition, which you can think of as a lock on your door. In our case, our lock is going to be based on the repository name. As you can see from this assertion, only deployments from this repository are able to impersonate the target service account. More so, only users that have access to a specific repository name will be able to run our deployment that we have set up. And at some point we'll be adding more fine-grained conditions for enhancing our security. But I think for now this is going to be sufficient. So we can come out of this, and at this point our identity federation is set up. We need to have a policy binding to create a workload identity user. So we'll go into one of our scripts that we've set up ahead of time. We've got this make principleSet policy binding, and we'll just explain this gclut command. So with this service account, we're adding a policy binding to the target project, and the principle that we're making is going to have the workload identity user role, and the principleSet needs to be in the following configuration. The configuration you can find from your identity pool. So we'll go back into our pool, we'll click into that, and we can see the structure of the IAM principle. So we can see it's like this, where you got the project number, the location, and the name of your identity pool. And then following on from that, you specify your subject values, so the attribute values essentially. So we are going to create our principal, and following on from our pool identity name, we're specifying our attributes, repository mapping. So we're expecting that when we have our callback from GitHub, that is going to give us the relevant repository name that's going to match the repository name we defined with our principal. And that's going to help us authenticate between those two services. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We can go ahead and attempt to run that command. And yeah, your policy binding has been updated. We've just created a principleSet against our service account. We can jump into our service account to check that the permissions have been created. So we jump into our service account, we can go into the permissions tab, and we can see here that we've generated a principleSet for our provider pool, sorry, identity pool, against the target repository. So yeah, once that's set up, we have all of the permissions ready and available to use. We just need to set up our workflow for running our CI/CD process. And we can search for our workflows file, which is inside this dot file for GitHub. On the workflows, we have terraform.yaml. And I'll briefly go through an explanation of what's happening in this deployment process. So when we're pushing our changes into the main branch, we'll be targeting our GCP project, and our runner is going to be checking out our code from the repo, and it's going to attempt to authenticate with GCP, to which we just need to provide some credentials. So we're supplying our workload identity provider, which needs to be structured in this format, where we supply the project number, the location, the identity pool name, and the provider name, which we have set up earlier in our identity federation configuration. And then we simply supply our service account, which is going to be used to be impersonated, so we can get the right access for deploying our resources. And then you're off to the races. Then you're simply applying your Terraform deployments. You're simply initializing, planning, and applying your resources onto the platform. So what we can do at this point is we can test our authentication system by making a small change into our repository and then deploying it onto the main branch to see if it's going to execute the actions or not. So let's try here. So let's make a file and let's commit that into our changes. And let's push that into our main branch. And then we can flip back to our GitHub repository. Let's refresh. And let's click this yellow circle so we can go into our GitHub actions. You can see it's setting up the job and it's checking out the code. You can see it's successfully authenticated with GCP. And it's running the Terraform initialization against our target system, which is good. Which means we are successfully authenticating with GCP with no service account keys and no long-lived credentials, which is nice. It's a very clean and secure way of securing your deployments, and you don't need to worry about leaking your credentials at some point in time that you will just inevitably forget about. And yeah, that's all I've got for now, and I'll see you guys in the next one.